Hey there crafters, it's Jen from She's Crafty Paperworks. Welcome to my channel where we explore all things handmade and Cricut card making. Today we're creating 3 awesome black and white cards, each with its own unique theme and background technique. I've gathered up some goodies from my stash, both old and new, and I'm aiming to use most, if not all of them. Now let's get cracking on those backgrounds so they have plenty of time to dry. I recently picked up this cool, spooky spider stencil from Echo Park, fittingly called Creepy Crawlies. I've attached it to my grip mat so I can slather on my dependable distressed texture paste in black opaque. I use this paste a lot this time of year, and as you can see, this paste goes a long way, so you only need to start with a little. I'm making sure to spread it nice and even over each spider to create a super smooth surface. I really love having a grip mat when applying texture paste through a stencil. It provides a lot of security, and as long as you don't press down too hard, you can often go back and forth to help you achieve a smooth, even coat. This is particularly helpful when the pastes are not self-leveling. You can somewhat take your time with it because it stays pretty pliable as long as you are working with it. Now, I can be a bit particular, but you certainly don't need to be with this stuff. Once finished, I will set the card aside to dry and go rinse off my grip mat in stencil and spatula. Also, before I put away this paste, I will take a square of plastic wrap. Press and seal will also work to cover up the paste in the jar and protect it from drying out. For the next background, I'm doing a little experimenting. I've never used Picket Studios Luxe paper glaze before, so I wanted to see how it would do with embossed cardstock and the butterfly. When I pulled out the products I wanted to use, I realized that I hadn't chosen a focal point for this card, so I opted to go with the Sizzix Vault in Scribbly Butterfly by Tim Holtz. The embossing folder I'm using is Spellbinders Embossing Folder of the Month in Meandering Floral from November 2023. But this same effect can be accomplished with various focal point images embossing folders. My first reaction to the Twinkle Lights paste was that it was drying very quickly compared to the Distress paste. I also had a hard time getting the paste thin enough to see the embossing with the spatula, so I opted to use my fingers to work in the paste. I wasn't sure how the butterfly would turn out because it had a lot of intricate cuts, but if I don't like it, I can always cut another one. Once this paste was dry to the touch, but the paper was still a bit damp, I embossed it a second time by lining up the previous image with the folder. By the way, you can tell if the paper is damp if it feels cold. I did this because I wasn't sure if the paste would crack if I waited till it was completely dry to emboss it again. For the last background, I am opting to use Distress Spray Stain in Picket to create a splatter effect. When doing this, I always begin by testing the sprays off to the side. Next, I tend to move in a diagonal motion because I typically want to leave the upper right corner as my designated white space. Even though it's technically not white in this case, it's a design term that will help focus the eye on the focal point versus confusing the eye as to where to look if everything is covered. The next step for this card is to stamp and emboss the focal point. I positioned my grip mat on my stamp positioner, and I'm using the Cosmos and Lavender stamp bundle from Hero Arts, but any flower bunch that has strong details will work. After dusting the paper with anti-static powder, I stamped and re-inked twice to ensure that I had enough embossing medium on the cardstock. Now, you do not need to press as hard as I am on the stamp positioner, but I find when it comes to stamping, old habits die hard. I'm using Ranger's Superfine Embossing Powder in white. If you're struggling with embossing, the finer the product, the easier it is to work with. Before busting out my trusty vintage embossing gun, I use a paintbrush to brush off any stray embossing powder remnants. See, I told you that embossing gun was vintage. I couldn't even tell you its name. I had it before my sons were born, so it's about 25 years old. Now I'm just getting ready to do all of my remaining die cuts. I'm starting with my nesting dies to create layers for 2 of my focal points. I do this off camera with my mini impress machine. Now we are all ready to assemble all 3 cards. I'm starting by adhering the embossed cardstock to a black card base. The camera isn't picking it up, but I absolutely love the glitter effect. By the way, if you're wondering, the glitter does not come off on your hands and it offers an elevated look. I wasn't as happy with the butterfly. As I mentioned, I think the die was just too intricate, but also the paste left a cast over the dark cardstock. So instead I opted to go with mirror cardstock for both the butterfly and the greeting to match the elevated look of the background. I glued a small white layer to a slightly larger black layer that I'm now attaching 1/16 inch foam tape to create an extra pop of dimension for the focal point. The mirror cardstock is thick, so I feel comfortable gluing only the base of the butterfly to the card and letting the wings lift off a bit. Once I attach the greeting, card number 1 is finished. For card number 2, I'm using a 110-pound white cardstock base for the black background that we had made. I'm attaching a second layer to the black embossed flowers die cut. This cardstock is not as heavy as the white cardstock at only 80 pounds, so I want to add that extra dimension. To really make this focal point pop, I used a thicker 1/4 inch foam to prop it up. I created 2 options for the sentiment for this card. Unfortunately, my camera memory was full and did not capture this process. However, the sentiment I used came from the same stamp bundle as the flowers. I made one in white with black embossing powder and another in black with white embossing powder. For the white option, I used the coordinating die cut to cut the shape while opting for a standard rectangle for the other. I ultimately went with the black sentiment because it had a cleaner look and it didn't compete with the flowers. For the embellishments on this card, I decided that both white and black would compete too much with the design, so I opted for a clear half-back round gems with a raindrop effect. The glue will dry clear. And now we're ready for card number 3. For both black card bases, I adhered a white panel on the inside. I could always write my inside sentiments with a white gel pen, but as I mentioned, this cardstock is only 80 pounds, so in this case, the white panel also adds strength and a more professional feel to the cards. I used a different set of nesting dies to create an inlay effect with a white panel and a black frame. I placed the panels off to the side because when you go to open up the card, I want the recipient to feel the texture of the spiders, which is oh so creepy. I used the die set from the Sizzix Vault Wicked by Tim Holtz. This is my first project with these dies. Be sure to subscribe because you will definitely see more projects with them as we approach Halloween. This set offers so many possibilities. Outside of the drying time for the texture paste, this was the quickest card, but it's certainly not short on personality. I've included pictures of each card at the end. I'm a new channel and it would really help me conquer the algorithm ogres with a free like and subscribe. I've listed the products used in the description below, and links are affiliate links, but I was not gifted any products and all opinions are my own. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you next Friday with a new card making video. Happy crafting!